I'm Adam.
And I'm Tad.
And this is Where There's a Williams, There's a Way. Hey Tad, did you know that I was a pretty good jumper when I was a kid?
Oh, really? I bet you can't jump as high as a frog.
You might be surprised. I actually won a high jump competition once, but it was nothing like a frog. How do you do it?
Well, it's all in the legs. We Welsh frogs have been practicing our jumps for generations. It's in our genes, you know?
Ah, the famous frog genetics. Maybe you can give me some pointers. I could use a few tips to impress my students during recess.
First, you need to channel your inner frog. Imagine yourself as light as a feather, ready to spring into action at any moment.
Got it. Like this?
Not quite there yet, Adam. Remember, it's all about the power in your legs and the momentum you build up.
Elgin Baylor was shooting, passing, and soaring through the air like no basketball player before him. Here's the story of the basketball icon and African-American civil rights advocate. Let's get started. Above the Rim, How Elgin Baylor Changed Basketball by Jen Bryant, illustrations by Frank Morrison. On a steamy summer day in 1945, a boy and his brothers played stickball in the street. There were plenty of nice parks in Washington, D.C., where people swam or played tennis, basketball, and baseball. But the child was black, and those parks were whites only. Sometimes, late at night, when the city was asleep, the older boys tunneled under the padlocked fences and played there anyway. But things can change in time, the child knew. Time was important. That's why his own name, Elgin, came from his father's favorite watch. He was 14 when a hoop appeared in the field down the street, and this time there was no whites only sign. It wasn't fancy, just a place to play basketball, a fine game of skill and strategy, and of running back and forth, a flat-footed game as level as the court itself. Now Elgin and his friends could play it too. At first they didn't have the right equipment, so they played with a tennis ball. Then someone found a volleyball. Then, finally, yes, a real basketball. Some of the older boys were very good, and they knew it. "Hey, you see that shot I made?" one bragged. "That's nothing. You see that shot I blocked?" another boasted. "Oh yeah? Well, you just try to slide by me," another challenged. Elgin heard what they said, but bragging was not his style. On the court, he let his body do the talking. In one smooth move, like a plane taking off, he would leap, higher and higher and higher, as if pulled by some invisible wire. And just when it seemed he'd have to come down, no. He'd hang there, suspended, floating like a bird or a cloud, changing direction, shifting the ball to the other side, twisting in midair, slashing, crashing, gliding past the defense, up, above the rim. And with a flick of the wrist or a roll off the fingertips, he put the ball in. The way he played was so different that people stopped what they were doing and watched. "Where did he learn those moves?" the other players asked. Elgin didn't have an answer. "I don't know," he told them. "It's spontaneous." Elgin grew taller and stronger. He jumped higher and leaped longer. His friends called him Rabbit. At all black Spring Iron High, Elgin brought his outdoor moves inside. He could score from anywhere on the floor, a hanging jumper from the corner, or a drive inside spin shot off the backboard. "Hey Tad, want to shoot some hoops with me?"
Well, I'm not sure. I'm more accustomed to lily pads than basketball courts, you know.
Oh, come on. It'll be a blast. Plus, I've seen you jump pretty high. You might have some serious hops.
Well, I suppose I do have a bit of froggy flair when it comes to leaping. All right, count me in. But if I end up in the pond instead of the hoop, you're fishing me out.
Deal. Just don't go for a slam dunk into the pond, okay?
No promises. But hey, if I accidentally score a three-pointer with a tadpole assist, I expect a round of applause.
Another deal. Let's see if we can make the most riveting basketball duo in history. "He's unstoppable," the other teams complained. "Go, Rabbit, go," the fans cried as Elgin leaped, turned, and twisted toward the rim, or took on a defender one-on-one. gave a quick head fake, and reverse dunked over him. Whenever Elgin played, people stopped what they were doing and watched. After high school, Elgin wanted to go to college, but the DC colleges wanted whites only. "You should come out west," said a friend who went to the College of Idaho. So Elgin did. It rained hard those first few days, but when the skies cleared, it was time for a game. And soon, people in Idaho stopped what they were doing and watched. "No one else plays that way," the coaches declared. "Where did he learn those moves?" they wondered. Elgin didn't have an answer. "I don't know," he told them. "It's spontaneous." That winter, Elgin led his college team to victory. And that winter, far away in Alabama, a black woman named Rosa Parks sat down on a city bus and refused to give up her seat to a white man. That was a victory too. When people learned about Rosa on the news, they stopped what they were doing and watched. Later, Elgin transferred to Seattle, where he led his team to the 1958 college championship finals. The newspapers wrote a lot about Elgin. They also wrote about the courage of the first black students in Arkansas to sit down in an all-white classroom. All across the country, people stopped what they were doing and watched. In 1958, the Minneapolis Lakers chose Elgin Baylor first. Out of all the college players in the nation, Elgin "Rabbit" Baylor was now a professional athlete. But in those days, being in the NBA was not like it is today. Fans flocked to watch Major League Baseball, but with only 8 teams, the NBA had a hard time selling tickets. The players didn't make much money. They traveled long distances in loud, clickety-clack trains and slept leaning over in their seats, their long legs jammed underneath. Sometimes they flew in made-over cargo planes. They played back-to-back nights and washed their uniforms in hotel bathrooms. They slept in beds that were too short. They played when they were injured or sick. Even so, Elgin played as hard as he could, and so did his Lakers teammates. Meanwhile, another team gathered in the basement of a church in Wichita, Kansas. They practiced sitting down and not fighting back, even if they were bullied and harassed. Later, they sat down at a whites-only lunch counter until they were served food.
"Oh, I think I've heard about him. Wasn't Elgin Baylor the guy who could dunk like nobody's business?"
Absolutely. He practically invented the art of dunking. He'd soar through the air like a frog catching flies.
"Maybe I should challenge Elgin Baylor to a leap-off. Winner gets bragging rights as the ultimate high flyer."
I'd pay to see that. But just remember, Tad, Elgin may have retired from basketball, but he still had some serious hops. Unfortunately, he passed away in 2021.
"No worries, he probably would have beaten me anyway."
But change came slower elsewhere. That winter in West Virginia, when the Lakers needed a place to stay overnight, every hotel said whites only, so Elgin and his teammates said no thanks. The whole team checked into Edna's Guest House, where anyone was welcome. They were hungry. Where could they eat? Downtown, all the nice restaurants were whites only. Elgin bought some cold food at the bus station and ate in his room. That night, as the other players suited up and walked onto the court, Elgin sat down before the crowd without a uniform. "Why isn't Elgin Baylor out there?" the reporters asked. "It's not fair," the fans complained. "We paid to watch the whole team." But his coach and his teammates understood. They were with him at the hotel. They knew he'd been turned away at restaurants. "I'm a human being," Elgin told them, "and I want to be treated like one. Sometimes you have to sit down to stand up," and that's what Elgin did. The fans noticed, the newspapers noticed, and the NBA commissioner noticed. A few weeks later, he made a new rule. No NBA teams would stay in a hotel or eat in a restaurant that practiced discrimination. Elgin had already changed the way basketball was played. Now, by sitting down and not playing, he helped change things off the court too. In 1959, Elgin was voted NBA Rookie of the Year. 2 years later, the Lakers moved to Los Angeles, California, where famous people seemed to be everywhere. Fame changed people, Elgin knew, but it didn't change Elgin. In one smooth move, like a plane taking off, he leaped, higher and higher and higher, as if pulled by some invisible wire. And just when it seemed he'd have to come down, no, he'd hang there suspended, floating like a bird or a cloud, changing directions, shifting the ball to the other side, twisting in midair, slashing, crashing, gliding past the defense, up, up, above the rim. And with a flick of his wrist, or a roll off the fingertips, he put the ball in. Wherever Elgin played, people stopped what they were doing and watched. Have you heard about our school's new initiative on diversity and inclusion?
No, what's happening?
Well, we're trying to teach the kids about embracing differences and standing up against discrimination. It's an important lesson.
That sounds totally awesome. But why are you telling me? I'm just a frog.
Tad, you might be a frog, but you're part of our community too. Plus, you're Welsh. That's a unique cultural background.
You're right, I do bring some froggy flair to the mix.
Exactly. We're all different in our own ways, and that's what makes life interesting.
Well, count me in, Adam. If anyone rebits on about discrimination, I'll hop right in and defend our diverse community.
That's the spirit. Together we can leapfrog over discrimination and make the world a better place for everyone.
I'm ready to ribbit for what's right.
If you've enjoyed this video and would like to make it a better for us, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. I'm Adam.
And I'm Tad.
And this is Where There's a Williams, There's a Way. Author's note. As a lifelong participant in both sport and art, I believe that the basic principles of mastery and excellence are the same whether you're running a 10K race, composing a poem, pitching a fastball, or painting a mural. Many of my previous books have been about art and artists, and in many ways, this one is too. Artists change how we see things, how we perceive human limits, and how we define ourselves and our culture. The great ones add whole new dimensions, expanding the definitions of their activities and providing models to be emulated by future generations. NBA Hall of Fame player Elgin Baylor is such an artist because he changed the way the game of basketball is played. Baylor did for basketball what Picasso did for visual art, and what Martha Graham did for dance, and what William Carlos Williams did for poetry. He broke with tradition and ventured into uncharted athletic territory, altering the game profoundly and forever. He came to basketball late, and lacking any formal coaching or instruction before high school, created his own unique moves and shooting style. This creativity, coupled with exceptional athletic ability and a fierce dedication to team play, made him a standout star in high school, in college, and in the NBA. In his 2013 autobiography, NBA Hall of Famer Julius Dr. J. Irving recalled the first time he saw Baylor play on television and the tremendous effect it had on him. Baylor gave me an idea of how basketball could look effortless and beautiful. There is scoring, putting the ball in the basket, but also the artistry of how it's done. I see his movement reenact in my mind, and I can't explain to anyone why it excites me, but I see it as someone liberating. This is a new idea, one I have never heard spoken aloud. Baylor's influence on the game is prodigious, and yet his contribution to basketball is often overlooked. Reasons for this include the racial bias surrounding professional sports and sports media coverage in the 1950s and 60s. The fact that pro basketball wasn't nearly as popular as baseball or football in the years during which Baylor played, and Baylor's own humility and aversion to self-promotion, bragging, or any inflated sense of self-importance. These factors have allowed his unparalleled performance, statistics, and his unique stylistic contribution to basketball to remain largely unheralded. Baylor's life on the court is only part of his story, however. His early experience in segregated schools and athletic clubs, his journey west to colleges in Idaho and Seattle, his entrance into the NBA, his friendships with NBA teammates and rivals, his quiet but effective protest against racial discrimination. These were the building blocks of a humble man with extraordinary talent, an athlete who, with his unique artistry, inspired players such as Michael Jordan, Julius Erving, and LeBron James. It's my hope that this book will introduce the next generation to a great American athlete and shine a light on his legacy. Did you know, when James Naismith invented basketball in 1891, the first basketball hoops were peach baskets, and the first basketball games were played with soccer balls with laces